Like we said earlier, I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, and many of them come into entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship, what you're doing, with a great idea for an end product. But the thing they end up learning by the time they get through and actually create a great business is the product that they were creating wasn't the product, the business model was. And so I think that's an important thing, and I'll say it again, the product that you guys are creating isn't the product, it's the business model. So it's important for you guys just to learn about how to think a bit differently about the business model. Who's got a bit of a read already about how to think about business models? Who understands what's in a business model? Quick show of hands. Okay, so maybe this is a bit new for some of you, so I'll go through it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a tool that we use from a startup perspective. We're going to talk about a bit of process. Startups are formed with, like we said earlier, in a realm of uncertainty. You don't know who your customer is, you don't know what product you're building, and that's why we're in this sort of search mode. We're not executing a known plan, we're going to search for the right business model to figure out what it is we're trying to build. So the process that we've got to think about is something that copes and adapts with that uncertainty as we learn more and more about the business. So that's what we're trying to get to here. These are the tools that startups use. So let's think about traditional business plans. So who has written a multi-page business plan, lots of research, graphs up to the right? Lots of you. Yep, this is how things used to be done in the old days. Who's still writing business plans like that? Cool. Okay, I think the problem with traditional business plans is that you often put so much into those business plans that you can become quite easily attached to them. So as you start getting that business plan out into the market, touching customers, you suddenly realize that things aren't as you thought in the plan, but because you're sort of wedded to the plan now, you find it very hard to change. So business plans and those traditional multi-page plans don't work well for startups because you're in an environment that's changing a lot. So really we need a process and a business model that allows us to collaborate with a customer to go out into the market, learn about what the product and business model needs to be, but then allows us to adapt the model as we go. And so, you may have heard this quote before, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And in startups, we say a similar thing, but we say no business plan survives first contact with a customer, because you start with a set of assumptions about the market, about the customer, about the product you're building, but as soon as you get out of the building and start talking to real people, things change. So I guess my point here is we need a business model that adapts to that learning as we go. So meet the Lean Canvas. This is the tool that startups use. Who's heard of the Lean Canvas or business model canvas before? Okay, so a couple of you. So the Lean Canvas really is a way to model all the important aspects about a business in a real succinct, easy to read way. So instead of 50-page business plan, it's just on one page. So it allows you really to update it very quickly. It allows anyone to just look at that one pager and get a quick feel for exactly what the business model is that you're building. The idea with the Lean Canvas is you start with a set of your assumptions about the various elements of the business model, and then you go out, talk to customers, validate or invalidate them, and turn those assumptions into fact. So this Lean Canvas helps us do this. There's two elements to the Lean Canvas, and at the back of your workbooks, there's an example there for you to look at. But there's two elements, really. There's the product or service that you're building is on the left-hand side of the canvas, and then the elements that describe the market are on the right-hand side of the canvas. And so you can see the two areas here on the canvas, the product and market. Really, as founders, you're trying to get a fit between those two things. And so once we've figured out there's a problem worth solving here, we're trying to get to a point where these two things match up. So look, I'm going to dig into the canvas a little bit more in more detail here. The first box on the canvas is the problem. So we've talked about problems a little bit today already. What's the big problem that we're trying to solve with this new venture that we're creating today? Have a think about how people are solving this problem today. Are there existing alternatives out there? Are they using competing products? Are they trying to solve that manually? Are they even not trying to solve it? Maybe your biggest existing alternative is just the status quo or some apathy. Get a read on what the big problem is that you're trying to solve. Second, who is this customer that we're solving it for? Have a think about who, be very specific about who this person is. How would they describe themselves? Most people tend to just write a demographic in here, 18 to 25-year-old woman. But if I think about describing myself, I would never use a demographic to describe myself. So think about how they would group themselves as the customer segment. Don't worry too much if that group seems small to start with. Remember, on our path to the North Star, we're starting with a small monopoly that we can dominate first. We're going to get there eventually. So in this area, we're thinking about who is the customer we're targeting. You want to have a think about as well, who is the early adopter customer? Who is the one who has this problem more extreme than anyone else? Because they're the people that we're going to go target first because they'll be most receptive to looking for solutions. Third element on the canvas, you'll see bridges the gap between product side and the market side. So this is the unique value proposition. So this really describes how we create value in the customer's mind. So we're looking for, are we building something better or cheaper or faster or more efficient than an existing product already out there in the market? So this really is the only part of the canvas where you get the opportunity to use a bit of marketing speak. This is really how you're going to sell the product in the customer's mind. But the idea here is it has to be unique. It has to be something unique in the market. So if the customer's interested in solving this problem and looks into the marketplace, they'll look at all of the other people doing similar things. Yours has to be unique over there. But also it has to be valuable to the customer. So that's why we fill out what the unique value proposition is. The fourth element of the canvas then is the solution, which is your product or service that you're developing. If you've already come up with a list of the top 3 problems this customer has, then here's the way you're going to solve them. And you'll notice here on the canvas it's an intentionally small box because we don't want you to obsess about the product particularly. We want you really to focus on all the other elements of the canvas. So if you look at the canvas, the size of the boxes denote roughly the amount of time you should give to each part. And like I said, everyone comes in thinking they've got a great idea for a product, and that's what this box is. That's your product or service, but you'll notice it's a tiny, tiny part of the overall business model. A good way to think about solution part here is to link it back to the problems. So if you've got the top 3 problems, well, how does your product or service solve each one of those problems? People have a tendency to overbuild solutions, but each solution should link back to that one problem. The fifth element of the business model then is channels. So thinking about how we're going to reach those customers. Have we got a direct sales model? Are we going to hire a fleet of salespeople on the phones, or are we going to reach them through some other channel? Maybe some online channel. Maybe we are doing some content marketing. Maybe we're doing blogs. Maybe we're doing paid advertising out there. But get specific about how you think you're going to find that customer. Where do they hang out? What sort of things do they read? Which blogs do they read? Where are they? Do they all congregate in a meetup that happens once a month down the road? So you want to be thinking when you're building your version 1 of the product, how can I get access to those people? So this is answering that first question of saying, if you had the world's best product, how are you going to distribute it to those people who really need it? And again, just want you to be specific here. So don't just come up with, well, we're going to use Facebook to distribute the product. Think about, well, is it a particular Facebook group? How many people are in that group? How many people are they going to reach through that channel? So think about all the different channels that you're going to use to distribute the product over time. The other 2 elements important here are the revenue and the cost model. So you'll see they're both at the bottom of the canvas here. There's no point building a venture if it costs more money to make than it makes back for you. So, think about putting your back over the napkin sort of assumptions here about how much it's going to cost you to develop this version of your product and roughly what the revenue is going to be from that same product. Good way to think about that is sort of work bottom up instead of top down. So think about the unit costs and the unit revenues per thing that you build and sell. So have a think list maybe what the revenue model is. Do you make a single sale and get, make money on a per sale basis? Have you got some recurring revenue? Maybe it's a software as a service model. Maybe you're making a commission on every sale that goes through your product or platform. So put some of those assumptions down on the costs and revenue chunk. Penultimate thing here to think about is the metrics. How are you going to measure that your business model is working? When you're building a proper business, that's easy. You just look at, how many customers you're reaching and how much of that's converting to money. But when you're building early stage startups, you don't often have those benchmarks to guide you. So you want to be thinking those metrics might be more about usage or repeat usage, or even how fast you're learning rather than the amount of money you're making. And when you get to a later stage and you update your canvas, then you can move to more financial driven metrics. So the last box on the canvas then is your unfair advantage. If you end up building a great product that is in high demand, then everyone naturally will want to copy you. So what's your unfair advantage to stop someone else copying this product or service that you create the next day? And I think inside Fonterra you've got access to this great resource. You've got the production distribution network, you've got all of these people and resources. So if you think access to resources is going to be your unfair advantage, then be specific. What specific resources do you think are going to help you in this venture? But also I'd warn you not to rely on that. So have a think a little bit outside the box, because you're all developing, or you will all be developing, sort of beta products, sort of test versions of services that for good reason you might want to deploy off-brand to start with, a separate conversation, but you might not, you might want to just test the market. So maybe your unfair advantage isn't access to this big brand behind you initially. Maybe there's something else. Maybe you've got some deals in place. Maybe you've got some relationships you can leverage, or maybe you've got some core IP, inside either your idea or inside Fonterra that you can leverage. But ultimately, the question you're trying to answer here is, what have you got that's going to stop someone else copying you tomorrow? So that's a quick walk through the lean canvas. And all of those elements together, in a very summary form, should give anyone a real quick idea of what it is you're trying to achieve from a business model perspective. And I think the thing that's important about the lean canvas is, you're not just listing a bunch of things in each box here. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be putting your assumptions down on this canvas, and as you get out and talk to customers and you either validate or invalidate what you thought was right, you're going to come back and update this canvas, and this canvas will become a bit of a central planning tool for you and your venture. But the important thing here is that there's linkages between almost all of those boxes. So if you change one box, everything else generally will have an impact. They might not change, but they may do. If you change your customer segment, then maybe they've got different problems. If you change your revenue model, that's going to impact a bunch of other things. So treat the canvas as a bit of an evolving tool as you go through building your startup. So Phil mentioned this morning a couple of different stages of growing a business: customer problem fit, proof of problem, proof of scale. So the bit that we're going to be interested in first is particularly this customer problem fit. If we don't get this stage right, then everything else that comes after it doesn't really matter in our experience. Because if you haven't found a problem worth solving, there's no point trying to monetize it too early. That's premature scale territory. So if you look at your canvases in the back, these are the 4 boxes that are highlighted that we want you to look at today. So what this is really saying is we're looking for, first, who is that customer segment? We're looking for a problem that the customer must have solved. I'll talk about that more in a second. But we're also looking, therefore, for the idea that the customer must have. So we've come up with a product or service that solves the customer's problem and it solves it in a way that they're crying out for to have. So that's what we're looking for in our version 1 MVP of a product. So just thinking a bit more about problem then, since that's one of the big things on the canvas. The way I tend to think about it is, what's your top 3 problems that customers have? We've all got problems, in our life. Ask any psychologist, we've all got lists of problems, but we're not motivated to solve all of our problems. So the problems which are important for you to look at are big problems, things that are happening recently. You know, if I haven't had a problem happen for 2 months, I'm highly unlikely to go looking for a solution to it. So problems that happen regularly, happen recently, and problems that actually cause some sort of emotional, you know, pain. What you're looking for is when you talk to someone, you know, when you find a problem that is emotional for them, their body language will change. You know, which is why I say, you know, surveys are not great for trying to get through this discovery phase, because as soon as you get an emotional problem, they're much more engaged. They step in and they're more passionate about how they talk to you. So that's what you're trying to get to when you think about problems. And also, you're looking at how they're solving it today. You know, what are those existing alternatives that they're using to solve this problem? If people aren't really going out of their way to try and solve these problems today, it's probably not a problem worth solving. You know, good problems worth solving are ones where people have got workarounds and they're trying to find a way to get this. They're sort of banging their head against the wall saying, I just wish someone would invent a better X, or, you know, find a better way to do that. So that's what we're looking for in the problem space. And so just sort of reiterated here, you know, problems, those sorts of problems cause some sort of action or response in the customers that you're talking to. And so therefore the solutions that we create have some great benefits. They'll help reduce that frustration. They'll help those customers achieve what they wanted. Great products delight their users, you know, help them to enable the things that they're dreamed of, and also help, you know, avoid their fears. So that's what we're looking for in the problem space. Customers, the other half of the canvas. You know, who are those potential customer segments? I want you to sort of drill down and think about, well, if you had to go out and find those people today, well, how would you find them? You know, it's one thing saying we're going to target all accountants, but, you know, how do you actually go find the ones that really need this particular problem if you are dealing with accountants? So like I said, how would they introduce themselves? You know, don't think about it from a point of view of demographic. We're looking for, you know, 18 to 25-year-old, you know, men who work in the city. You know, that's not how they would group themselves. Generally, you'd be thinking about segmenting customers in terms of they're having a similar problem. You know, how they all share this same common trait. Particularly then have a think about who the early adopters are for your product idea that you've created, you know, your version 1 product. And the early adopters, like I say, are going to be the ones that are going to be willing to try this problem first, but they're also going to be the ones that are going to be, I guess, feel this problem acutely more than anyone else, so much so that they'll want to engage with you, give you the feedback, and help you shape a better product out of what you're trying to build. So have a think, who is this particular customer? Could I go out and find 10 of them today? And I think the context here is that, you know, no one really cares about new products in general. You know, we're all busy, there's millions of apps out there, and we're all very distracted in our life. So, you know, the goal really is to create something uniquely valuable so that you rise above all of that noise out there. You know, how many people have downloaded an app and tried it and then, you know, immediately afterwards deleted it off their phone? You know, you don't want to be one of those, products. Okay, so that's a very brief intro to the Lean Canvas. So let's have an exercise now. So continue working in the pairs that you had in your little pod, but working on your own idea. Use each other as a sounding board. Take that massive idea, that what if that you worked in the last exercise, and then think, well, what's my minimum viable version of that? What's my business model for that idea? And then we'll come back and share with the group. So just do a quick time check. Okay, so 10 minutes and then we'll come back. Okay, thanks guys. Okay, so the next chunk is really about how do you test that idea. I mean, we've done a great set of exercises, great set of workshops, but really it's all been a bit of theory. So, you know, we've got some great drawings and some great ideas written down in our books. But now let's think about how do we do that testing. And I think the key here is really, you know, insights really come when you start talking to customers. You know, we all have a educated opinion about what we think should go on the canvas and makes the first business model. You know, like I say, we all start with assumptions based on our own knowledge of the market. But the real insights come, though, when we actually get out the building and challenge some of those assumptions. You know, some of those assumptions might have been formed a long time ago or through some collated market research. And I think the interesting thing is when you actually start talking to people, you understand the nuance of what the real pain points are. And often I've seen market research, delivered by research departments inside big organizations. They often a bit rolled up. It's often not quite the key points on the ground, the emotional pain points, and that's what we're really looking for in building a business here. So, like we say here, your goal as a founder or as an entrepreneur here is really to get out of the building and talk to those customers. Not just now, not just to inform the business model, but throughout the entire life cycle of your venture. That could be actually getting out of the building to talk to them to start with, but as you start building a product or service or platform or whatever you're doing, that feedback changes into different ways. You might be talking or emailing your customers regularly. You might have a customer service department that's doing that. But you're still incorporating that customer feedback into everything that you do. I guess the thing to think about here is not to be worried. Some people think that, well, what if my customers don't talk to me? But in our experience, when people actually get out and talk to their customers, they often, those fears instantly disappear because they're always happy to talk to you because you're talking to someone who's got this problem that they're looking to be solved. So if you come up to someone and say, hey, I've got a great solution for you, tell me more about this problem so I can understand, or I'm actively out there trying to solve this problem. I think, it changes the dialogue a little bit, and like these points here say, you're showing interest in them. You're not selling them a solution, you're not pitching them, I've got a great solution here, but you're saying, hey, look, I'm trying to find a way to solve this to make a better, widget, service, whatever you're trying to do. So I guess don't be worried about talking to customers. There's a natural fear, especially if you're not in a customer-facing role. There's a natural fear of talking to customers. But I guess get over that because, if you're targeting the right customers, they won't have any problem talking to you. So this first next stage of testing the things you've written down on your canvas then is really about discovery. You're really going out there trying to say, well, I think I know this about the customer, but I'm not sure. So I want to talk to them in a way that allows me to discover as much as I can about their problems, their existing alternatives, how they're solving this today, even what makes them tick, what makes them frustrated, what makes them angry, what makes them delighted. And so, keep in your mind when you're talking to customers, your goal is discovery. We don't know what the business model needs to be yet. We think we know what it is, but I want to talk to you and figure out if I'm on the right track. So the sorts of questions you want to be thinking about are ones that aren't closed questions. You don't want to be asking questions that have a yes/no answer. You want to ask questions where there's a very, the scope to allow you to talk and discover what the outcomes are there. So sorts of questions that you should be talking to customers here, tell me the hardest part about doing, solving this problem or this problem that you've got. Can you tell me about the last time it happened? Why was that? Why was it hard? So you're trying to find entrance routes that allow you to sort of open up that conversation and open up that dialogue so that you can look for those emotional responses, like I said, that sort of make someone sort of lean in, and then you can start digging in because that's the gold in those customer discovery interviews. There's a few things that you probably shouldn't do when you're doing customer interviews. I guess the biggest tendency when you go out talking to people is pitching them an idea. Hey, we've got this great solution, we're building this awesome thing, let's sign you up for it now. So I advise you not to talk about your idea, not yet anyway, because as soon as you start putting that in your customer's mind, they start going from a sort of discovery mindset to a very closed mindset. And if you show them anything or if you tell them about what you're doing, they tend to become very critical about that thing rather than being open-ended about the problem. So like we said, the solution is a tiny part of what you're looking for here. You're looking to try and uncover the real painful problems, the emotional problems. So careful not to go pitching your idea. And also, don't ask them about the future. Would you do this? Would you pay for a product if it did X? Would you like it if it did this more? Customers aren't necessarily great about talking about solutions to things. All they know is, I've got this big problem and I want it solved. So just be very careful not to bias the people that you're talking to. I see it again and again when I work with entrepreneurs. And I think, on that point as well, on that point of bias, you want to go out talking to customers with as much of your open mind as possible. The natural tendency as an entrepreneur is to go out and listen to anyone who agrees with you and discard anything that sounds a bit negative. So it could be that 10 people you spoke to don't like what you're doing, but this one person who loves what you're doing is like, man, I'm going to come listen to you. Let me talk to you some more. So, try to have a bit of an open mind when you're doing that, and use the mentors as well throughout this program to help keep some objectivity for you. Okay, so like I said, theory is one thing. Writing down what you think your assumptions are is one thing, but no learning happens when you're inside the building like this. You're learning about the process, but you're not learning about your business models. So let's just do a quick time check. How much have we got? I think 16:53. So I think maybe if we reconvene here about 5:30, that feels about right, Phil? Okay, so 5:30. I want you to get out of the building and go find some of those customers. I want you to go talk to them. I want you to walk out of the room. I want you to go find them on the street. I want you to go phone them up. I don't want you just to talk and phone to your friends. I don't want you talking to each other. I want you to think, the customer that I've just written down here, how do I find those people, and go test what you've written down if that's true. Do they have the problems that you've written down? Do they understand the existing alternatives?